So I think that you're the first one I've had on here who has coached in 11 man in addition to 8 man. How many of your first years at Clifton-Clyde were in 11 man?
My first three were as a coach.
And what was that experience like?
You know, it had some good things. It had some bad things. I that was my first 3 years. I was young and kind of naive, and uh, just coming back to my hometown to coach. And Clifton-Clyde was kind of the program was kind of down. The numbers were down. The success was down. My first year of teaching there, they asked me if I wanted to, you know, step in and be the head football coach. And I said, no, I'm not ready to do that my first year. So the second year they asked me again, and I went on as an assistant coach. And then the third year I moved up to the head coach. But yeah, it was kind of a struggle. I was trying to put my own, I guess, brand on it a little bit and try to get things turned around. Um, we just lacked the numbers at that point. But once we kind of made the transition to 8 man, it seemed like things kind of got going in the right direction.
And one of the benefits of dropping down a classification is that enrollment wise, you now have one of the bigger ones in that grouping. But as far as scheme wise, adjusting, what was that like going from 11 to 8? Had you had any experience with the 8 man game before?
No, none at all. I'd only played 11-man football in high school. That's all I'd ever seen, ever watched. So as soon as we went to the school board and we had talked to them about switching to 8 man, the biggest push, for us doing that was just trying to put the kids in a better position to have some success and try to get, back to winning. So that was kind of our main motive for trying to get to the 8 man. And plus, like I said, our numbers were down a little bit. Um, but yeah, as soon as we made that transition, I started trying to find out what was the big difference, if there was any. One of the first coaches I reached out to was Kevin Ayers. He was a state champion in 8 man football at Jetmore that year. Kevin Ayers was real nice. He visited on the phone numerous times. We met up one summer down in Topeka at the Acacia coaching school, and we sat there at a table and talked football. And he shared, lots of offense and defensive stuff with me. And there were other coaches, that were very successful at that time that I reached out and got film from and visited with. So I was just trying to learn, what was the big difference with the game and what I was going to kind of be getting myself into. So it did take a little bit of some learning, some new things, but basic thing is still football.
I'm trying to think back in those days, there were, I think, more TVL teams that were still 11 men back then because you would have had Centralia. Is Onaga TVL or no?
They, yep, Onega.
Okay.
Yeah, at that point, when we were
I think Frankfurt might
11
have still
man.
been 11 men.
Yep. Yeah, all of those: Frankfurt, Centralia, Onega, um, Valley Heights.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, all of those were still 11. And now in the TVL, the only ones that are still 11 now, I believe, are Centralia and Valley Heights. And then actually, Onega just jumped back up
Yeah.
to 11. They were in 8, they just jumped back up.
Yeah, I remember their
So,
coach at one point asked if I had any wing T film he could look at because he wanted to, I guess, run that in the 11 man ranks. So,
mm-hmm,
um,
mm-hmm.
now competing in the TVL and 8 man, though, um, you it probably in the early to mid 2000s it wasn't quite as strong as it became in the late 2000s, but nonetheless you've got some traditional powers there in Baileyville, and before long Hanover got charged up, obviously, and Axtell was always good. What was it
Yeah.
like competing in that era?
It B&B was the one of the top teams there, and that was the funny thing. I tell a lot of people when we made that transition to 8 man football. I remember the principal at that time. He called me up and he said, "Hey, we just got our first phone call from a school, looking to schedule us next year for 8 man." And I said, "Well, who's that?" And they go, "Well, it's a league school, B&B." And I was like, "Okay." Well, then I started looking, and yeah, B&B that year I believe was a state runner up, and I was like, "Oh,
Right.
great!" First one knocking on the door is a state runner up. So yeah,
They're
the
probably eager
league.
because they couldn't get anyone else scheduled.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, I know how that is. That when you get kind of good, some people want to dodge you, and I'm sure they were having a hard time filling a schedule, and they knew we had every week open, so we were an easy target. But
Yep.
yeah, the league. I mean, even when it's down, I really feel like the Twin Valley League's always got one or two schools. It just seems like they compete very well every year. But yeah, the Twin Valley League. I mean, historically, I think it has been a very tough league to play in.
For sure, and that definitely shaped your own program. So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
talked earlier, you mentioned your own personal brand. What is your brand of football? What is Clifton-Clyde Eagle football?
Well, as far as how we play, I mean, it's changed a little bit over the years. Like I said, when we switched over to 8-man football, I was kind of all I really knew was single wing from 11-man football. That's what Coach Buller had kind of ran here at Clifton-Clyde. That's what I ran when I was in high school. So as far as an offense that I really knew, it was single wing. Now, how that fit into the 8-man ranks, I really didn't know. So what we kind of did was we took some of those single wing concepts and came up with what we called was our power set, which was a double tight. Sometimes it was unbalanced like the single wing, but we basically took the spinner back out, and we went from more of a true wing to kind of what we called our power, where we had two blocking backs, and then we just had our deep back that we would snap to our tailback. And with those two power backs, we could also short snap to our up backs, and we could run some different counters and traps, reverses with those, and some quick hitters as well. So it had a little bit of misception and trickery to it, I guess you'd say, but it just didn't have that spinner series that the old single wing did. So that was kind of the direction we went. A lot of people said it was a very boring offense, and it was. But the kids really bought into it at that time. We had big kids, and they were physical, and the kids kind of just enjoyed that type of football where, um, you know, 3-4 yards in a cloud of dust was kind of the mindset. We'd line up, and we knew the defense knew what we were running, but we just dared you to try to stop us. So that was kind of our brand, was just rough and tough power football at the beginning. But now we really do not run any of that. Over the years, the type of kids we have has changed. We're not as big size wise. We're still pretty athletic and pretty fast. So over the last probably 5 to 8 years or so, we've really started to become more of a multiple set on offense, where we spread it out. And each year, it seems like we just throw the ball more. And I expect, this year, 2023, we'll probably set some more passing records because just the type of kids we have, I think we're going to throw the ball around a little bit more. So that's, kind of the direction we've went offensively, defensively. Going back to Kevin Ayers, we really, our base defense was that 3-2 monster. But again, over the years, we've put in some different defenses from the 5-1 to the 4-2. We've run a lot of 3-3 this year. We're putting in some 2-3.
Hmm.
So there are different things that we're doing, just based on, I guess, the kids that you have and the hand that you're dealt.
You guys definitely seem to use your speed a lot more and have more speed than you did back when I competed against you in 2008, 2009, 2010 kind of era. Because I was playing against you guys at Lakeside, kind of at the end of when you guys had all those big dudes,
Mm-hmm.
that would just lean on you and wear you out.
Yeah.
And I remember my senior year after that game, um, I felt, yeah, I played nose. I felt as if I had shrunk 5 inches. My spine had been compressed 5 inches down because I had just been spending all night battling this 6'5", 270-pound kid or whatever. And he's a
Yep.
load. I was only 210 or 205 or something. So
Yep.
yeah, that was
Yeah.
oh
Back then we definitely had some big kids, and then just gradually, like I said, we just kind of, the kids right now we're just a little bit smaller. I think this year we probably won't have a kid on our roster over 200 pounds this year. So, you go back to that 2007, 2008 you're talking about, we probably, across the offensive line from tight end to tight end, and then our two blocking backs, we probably averaged 230 on
yeah.
all of those guys. And then we would just rotate in three or four little scat backs that weighed 140 to 160 pounds. You just kept them fresh running behind the big horses. But yeah, like I said, now we definitely don't have that kind of size. We're still pretty rough and tough, but we're definitely more athletic and probably a little bit quicker.
If you had big dudes like that again, would you two tight end it up and just mash it, mash it, mash it again?
No, definitely. We've talked about that. I mean, um, I've got a couple new assistants, guys that I've coached that are coming on the staff this year, and Max Schwab and Michael Sear, and that was
Yeah.
the stuff I ran with those guys in high school. And They definitely ask, are you going to run any power? I'm like, nope, we probably will not run any power this year. If I could, I would. I feel very at home with that. I feel very confident with that. The multiple spread stuff, throwing the ball around still makes me a little bit nervous because there's always, uh, I think, more possibilities for bad things to happen when you're doing that.
That's the classic quote, right? When you throw a football, three things can happen and two of them are bad. It's
Exactly.
yeah, it makes us leery.
Yeah.
I just lost what I was gonna say. That's okay. I have a different question. Obviously, what you do and have done is a fair bit different from the 11-man single wing. Looking at what Coach Fowler did at Spearville with a much more traditional wing back. Obviously, you don't have a blocking back. You have the offensive lineman basically pick up that job. Have you ever been tempted? And you've got a good thing going for you, so it doesn't surprise me that you haven't gone this way. But have you ever been tempted a little bit, maybe to go in that direction, to have more misdirection, or to go to more of a traditional wing look potentially?
Yeah, and back in those early years, we did have a few sets where we went with a wing, and then took out the blocking back and kind of had what you'd call your spinner back and your tail
Mm-hmm.
back. And we actually did run, a few of the actual spinner series. And I visited with Coach Fowler a few times, and I've watched some film on what he does. And yeah, he's definitely the more traditional single wing stuff. We just didn't do it as much just because I felt like it didn't fit our personnel as well. And that was kind of the direction we went with just the two blocking backs. It was, I guess, like our mindset at that point was we're going to bring 7 blockers to the point of attack. We were going to leave the defender farthest away from the play. He was our unblocked defender, and we were going to overwhelm you with blockers, more guys than you could account for. And the one defender that was unblocked, if he made the tackle, we were definitely moving the sticks at that point.
One concept that I really love out of Matt's single wing is the wedge, which is you have, unbalanced line, so your guard fires out on the nose. Your tackle and center, they put their inside hands on his back and they squeeze in and they shove him forward, and then the two tight ends do the same thing to those guys. So you've got a 5 versus 1 situation going on there. Have you ever implemented something like that?
Yeah, we have. I mean, in that power, because we've got those two blocking backs,
Right, you could have a
and
7-man wedge.
yeah, it's basically if we would run what we would call our zero, which was right up the center, it was the same kind of look. We just bring everybody, straight downhill.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically those two blocking backs are getting in those two holes, on each side of the center, right in between the guards, and we were just coming downhill.
Sure, yeah. I mean, downhill's a pretty good way to describe you guys. And you mentioned people might think your offense was boring. I'm sure a lot of people thought Smith Centers was kind of boring. Okay, they hand it off to the halfback on the right, they hand it off to the halfback on the left, they run the fullback, whatever. Once in a blue moon, they let the quarterback keep it.
Yep.
But, it didn't seem to hurt them too badly. I
No,
remember,
no.
and I think this is on YouTube, there was a talk you did with some other coaches online. I don't know how long ago this was, but let's check to see if my memory is right. I think you said that most games you would run just 2 plays, which is basically we run left and we run right. I think it was 23 blast and 24 blast.
Yep.
How many
Yeah, those.
games? What percentage of games did you only call those 2 running plays, outside of maybe an occasional pass or whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, in a game, I bet I would run either we'd call it 24 or 23, or then we'd add the blast to it, which is a little bit of a different blocking
Yeah.
scheme up front. We would run that, I bet, 75% of the game if we could. If you couldn't stop it, we were going to keep that going.
Mm-hmm.
Those were my favorite plays. I remember probably back in one of those years you're talking about, we actually, one of our t-shirts that we sold was, run power 24 blast. And we had the play drawn up on the back of the t-shirt. And we still talk about that. It was just one of those plays that if you executed it, correctly, it was just so hard to stop. And and back then, like I said, yeah, we'd throw the ball maybe in a game, we'd throw the ball 2-3 times, maybe in a game. And now we're completely opposite of that. Last year, we're throwing the ball, 20 to 30 times a game. And this year, we'll probably do it even more.
Wow. You got some Jeff Savage film you're working on here, or?
Well, I've been talking to some guys, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Um, to what extent do you think a team or player can be made to play more physically or to be tougher, right? Because this is something that people have talked about for a long time, and I don't think there's a clear answer on this. Is that how much of it can be taught, how much of it can be learned, how much of it can be acquired? Because clearly kids can be made to be tougher. Clearly they can learn things and become tougher. But I also wonder whether there's a limit on that. I don't know that you can do it. You're not going to take the softest kid and make him into someone that is as tough as nails. I mean, there's a ceiling, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think, every kid has, a different level of that inside of them. I do think with some kids, it needs to be coaxed down a little bit more or coached up a little bit more. And I think a lot of the things we do, from the weight room to practices to what we're doing in our summer conditioning, um, so much of the physical stuff we do is probably almost more of a mental challenge than it is physical. And that's something that I feel like we constantly preach to the kids is, when things start to get hard or they start to get tough, the first thing that happens is your mind starts to tell you to quit. You can't go anymore. You can't do anymore. And we just are constantly telling the kids, don't listen to your mind. Your body will get through it. I talked to Coach Hamill today going down to Lincoln, and he heard about the 40-40s that we run that first week of football practice. And we've done that for over 20 years. And he asked how we did that and what we do. So I kind of told him, the process we go through that week. And on the end of the week, the kids are running 40-40s on Friday. And it is a physical challenge, but probably more than anything, it's just a mental challenge for those kids. When they hear that we're going to run 40-40s, especially the freshmen, they're like, holy cow, I can't do that. But every kid has always gotten through it. And I think when they do get through some of those things, they look back and they're like, you know what, I did do that. It wasn't that bad.
Gotta
So
be
I
a big
think those,
relief when they do.
yeah, it is. But I think when you do things like that and you start to figure out your mind, sometimes you can push your body a little bit farther than your mind thinks you can. And I think that's when they start to develop a little bit more toughness.
Definitely. I haven't visited in a few years, but I recall you guys having a really good team website for the Eagle football team. You'd have all the records on there, and there were photos from each game. Were you?
Yeah.
Did you handle that? Was that somebody else?
Yeah, I actually did do that. And then our school website changed over and we lost all of that, or
Ah,
yeah, so it's not near as neat as it was. But yeah, back in the day, I spent a lot of time putting a lot of stuff on there, and it's kind of went by the wayside, unfortunately.
that's a shame because that seemed like one of those really good publicity moves. Where people are more aware of the program. They can go and look, and it's just, oh, that's my cousin who's the third leading rusher or whatever. I mean, look how many yards he's got. I
Yeah,
mean,
and I think that's kind of went to the social media aspect
mm,
now. Now I'm kind of really pretty big on like Twitter. We've got a Snapchat for our football team. We've got our Facebook page. So I think social media has kind of went into that direction. So that's kind of the avenue we've went. And I think we try to keep people, up to date on what's going on and interested in our football program that way.
sure, yeah. You guys have picked up some games in recent years, and I think it was 2020. You guys picked up Hanover mid-season and played them. I think that was their most competitive game of the year. I think you guys only lost by 20, and I don't think they
Mm-hmm.
mercy ruled everybody. They didn't mercy rule the state game, but they were a dominant team. Um, what's it like competing and coaching against Coach Hoyer? What things does he bring to the table and make it difficult? Obviously, he's really good at developing kids, and his kids are always strong and fast. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but as a football
Yeah.
mind, what are the challenges?
I mean, he's a great coach. He's got a great coaching staff, and they've got great athletes all the time up there. I mean, they just, right now they're kind of going through, I guess, a rebuilding phase,
Mm,
which they're not used to. Usually, it's a reloading phase for them. But from what I've heard, their grade school and their middle school is just booming with athletes, and the future looks very bright for them. But yeah, it is. It's a challenge to go up against and play them. And there for a few years, scheduling, even though they were a league school, we just, with the districts being set by the state and then only having 2 or 3 games to schedule, we were unable to schedule them. They were unable to schedule us. And then I think that was that year, that COVID year
yep.
was when we had a game canceled and we thought we had a game filled with someone else. And then they bailed on us that Friday, in fact. and I knew Hanover was open on Friday, so we called Hoyer up on Friday, in the morning, said, "Hey, do you want to get together and play?" And and we felt like we had a pretty good team, and it's not going to hurt to play good competition. So
Sure.
we agreed to go up to Hanover and play them, on a short day and short notice. And yeah, we came up short, but I thought the kids played well, and it was good competition for us.
Because I think the only two losses that team had were to Hanover, the eight-man Division II champions. Oh, and by the way, when Coach Steinbrock talked about them not being in districts with them, for most of the recent history, Clifton-Clyde's been Division I and Hanover's been Division II, so they couldn't play each other in districts. So they only had, two or three opportunities early in the season potentially to play each other, and just didn't work out. But done. So your only two losses were to state champion teams, which were Hanover in Division II and Little River in Division I, which is a tough break. It kind of sucks when that is the way it works out. I mean, obviously losing in general sucks, but it's just doggone it. Why couldn't we have drawn someone else and gotten a little deeper?
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's the way that kind of has worked out, and it's funny. I don't have those stats in front of me, but I have looked back over the years to our playoff appearances, and it seems like we always, round 2 or round 3, we run into someone who's either going to be the eventual state champ or the state runner up, and it's just kind of been that way. We seem like we kind of face up with them early in the playoffs. But yeah, that year we had those two losses. We beat Little River in overtime early in the season, then we lost to Hanover, and then faced Little River in playoffs, and then came up short against them, and they went on to win state that year. So it was a good season, competitive year. We had a very tough schedule with those guys on there.
Definitely. What do you think about the new playoff format that came out in 2018, where 4 teams make the playoffs from each district instead of 2 each?
I like it, I guess, as far as it's getting more teams into the playoffs, but I still like this year. I don't consider us this last year, 2022. I consider that as not a year of making playoffs because we didn't win that. We were even the number 1 seed, and we got beat by the number 4 seed Quinter, which, I tell the kids that's the play-in game to the real playoffs. So
right.
Even though you're in the playoffs, I tell the boys you're not in the playoffs till you win that play-in game, and then you're actually in the playoffs.
I mean, when I go through old Kansas pre-games and I look at the records, just 8-2. Oh, you lost in the first round of the playoffs is what my brain says. I mean, after going 8-1, because that's just what that means. If you played 10 games, that means first round of playoffs is when you got bounced.
Right.
It's really it really messes with me that there are only 8 regular season games. I personally don't like the extra teams in the playoffs because I actually dislike having more teams in there because that means bad teams make it all the time. Now, the counter argument to that, of course, is that you're going to leave some good teams out. So, in the Twin Valley League, a good example of this was Axtell in 2010 in Division II. They were a really good team. They were 7-2. They had some big wins, including over you guys. But they were in the same district as Hanover and B&B, so it's just kind of, sucks to be you. You don't get to taste the postseason. But my mentality is, if you can't beat B&B and Hanover, do you deserve to compete against them in the playoffs? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
to me,
yeah.
The district is your playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. I see exactly where you're coming from, but I agree with your argument as well. I think back to, I think it was just this last year. I think it was Burlingame's district was another district that was really loaded. They had Linden, Burlingame. I think there was a private school down in Kansas City that was really talented. So yeah, there you go. It's just so hard from year to year. You'll have some districts that are really down. So they're going to take 4 teams that aren't that good. Which, I'm not a fan of that. But then you're going to have another district like we're talking about with Burlingame's where they're really loaded. And then you see some good teams that are getting left out. So
that would happen.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know what the best answer is. I know we're trying as coaches in the state, trying to come up with ways to make it more fair and better for everyone. But I think we're moving in the right direction. We're probably not quite there yet, though.
Yeah. I think another thing I dislike is, I'll admit this is tinged a little bit by personal experience. So 2018 was the first year of this new system. I was a Southern Cloud that year. We went 3-5 in the regular season. We won 3 district games, which made us the number 4 seed. Okay, we're in the playoffs. Yay! We get to take our 12 players out to Hanover to play the then two-time defending champion Wildcats and soon to be three-time, three-peat champions.
Yep.
And it's not a competitive ball game in any sense of the word. I mean, their junior varsity could have beaten us. I don't want to
Yeah.
say with ease, but they would have handled us. It wouldn't have been a problem for them.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's a tough situation. I know for a program and for a coach, you want to be excited about doing
Mhm.
something, positive, making the playoffs. But yeah, I know exactly. I've been there too, where
Yeah.
you're going up against an opponent, and you're like, yeah, this isn't going to go well. Just you know how it's going to go. So yeah, that's a tough position to be in as well.
Yeah, I like the cross district aspect where what I would do personally, if I were the dictator, I was in charge of all this, I would make it two teams make the playoffs from each district, and the rest of them are in cross district games. So, if you're the sixth place team in a district, you play the sixth place team. In another district, you're at the bottom. Next year, you improve, you work hard. Maybe you're the fourth place team, and you play another fourth place team. It's just, hey, we ended our season playing a better team than last year. That's because we improved. And you can tell your kids, hey, this is what we're doing. Then the next year, maybe you're the third place team. You keep working. I mean, hypothetically, you keep playing better competition, and then by the time you're a third place team, you would hope that you can compete with a one or two or give them some resistance at least, if not beat them. But
Yeah.
as it is now, being a fifth place team in a lot of situations leads to a much nicer end to your season than being a fourth place team.
Yeah.
Because I think there have been how many have there been? Because there have been 5 playoffs with this system, so there have been 81 versus 4 games. And I think there have been 5 wins by the fourth seeded team, which is more than I would have expected, to be fair. I wouldn't have expected that many. But nonetheless, I mean, the number of blowouts is just, I mean, it's a high number.
Well, and and here we go. That's what happened to us this year.
Mm-hmm.
We really, and it boiled down to that game with Quinter. They're a very good team.
Right, they had
Uh,
athletes.
and it was amazing to me because I felt like we had them really well scouted out and we were really prepared. Everything was going exactly the way we wanted. We scored on our first 3 possessions. They went 3 and out in their first 3 possessions. I kind of told the coaches before the game, I felt like we had an opportunity to maybe 45 them. And then we had one kid get hurt that fourth possession, and then they ended up getting the ball back, and then they scored. And then that kid never came back. And it's amazing, in 8-man football, I guess, you get one kid injured and he can be that pivotal in the game. And we didn't respond very well. And we ended up, letting Quinter come back and chip away. And they got that last score fourth quarter in the game, and they end up beating us. So, I mean, here we are talking about, the 4 seed and the 1 seed, and it actually happened to us this year. So
It has happened. I give Mitch Ingleton some crap for that too, because he was 8-0 and they lost to a fourth seed. It's just, dude, you're making my argument weaker. I don't appreciate this. Stop it. How dare you?
yep, it happens. I
It
know.
does, yeah. And credit to him. Um, Defensively, what's your mindset? Are you more conservative, aggressive? Do you bend but not break? What's your overall defensive philosophy?
Well, I don't call the defense, but I like aggressive defenses. We've always been that way. Coach Carlson for many years was a defensive coordinator, and that's kind of the way I wanted to run, and he did that. Coach Fahey runs the defense now, and he's that way as well. It was kind of fun. What was it, last summer when I coached in the All-Star game? I actually got to call the defense, and that was fun for me because we just pinned our ears back, and I just let the linebackers fly around and play fast and physical. And they were just Stutzman from Madison was just having a blast. He's like, "I love your defense." I'm like, "I'm just letting you guys play. Just go out and go." So if I have my choice, I like to be very aggressive. We do a lot of um, pressure things with our linebackers and even corners off the edge. And then we like our defensive linemen to be very aggressive. Sometimes that burns you. That sets you up for screen passes and some things like that. But if I have my choice, we're going to, be coming like our pants are on fire.
Which is an interesting contrast to your offense, which in some ways is a very conservative offense. You play it safe, you possess the football, you don't. You rarely look for the big play. You're calling plays for first downs, not touchdowns typically.
Yeah, yeah, especially back in those early years. That's like I said, if we could get 4 yards, our best defense back then was our offense. If we had the ball in our hands, we didn't have to worry about you scoring. Just move the chains, let the clock move, and that was the mindset. Like I said, now we are a little bit more risky, I guess, offensively because we are doing more things. But yeah, we're going to take what you give us. We're not a big threat offense. We never have been. We like, just to move those chains. So I like that aspect. But what hurts us is sometimes if we do get down by 2 or 3 scores on a team, then we have that trouble finding that offensive firepower to, get back in a game late in the game if you are down.
Right, it's like Parcells' old Giants. They just
Mhm.
grind it, maintain
Yep.
control of the ball, and all that. Play great
Yep.
defense.
Yep.
Something just came into my mind back in 2009, especially, but I think they did this in 2008 too. Hanover would line up with the biggest splits I've ever seen outside of gimmick formations, where their linemen would come to the line, they hold their arms out, and their hands aren't touching even. There's space between their hands by a good bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how did you guys defend that? What are your thoughts on defending a setup like that? Because not a lot of teams use it. In fact, in 8-man, it seems to me they gravitate to really small splits a lot of times.
Yeah, they did that a lot. If you could get a quick guy in there, but usually Hanover was pretty athletic and quick, even on their offensive line as well. So the mindset is you think you can shoot through that gap and get them, but usually it just gives them better angles. And I don't know that they do that as much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they just use their athletes very well on those line splits. Another team that reminds me of that was your old coach, Coach Christians. I remember,
True.
but he would do that a little bit too, and that would always. Uh, I guess I think of it more even on the defensive side with his defensive ends. He liked to play those guys really wide,
Mm-hmm.
and that always kind of gave us fits, from a offensive blocking standpoint. And I know you guys did do some of that as well on your offensive line, maybe not quite as much as Hanover, but yeah,
The
I mean,
the
I
guards
really
would be
don't.
the guards would be pretty standard. Their splits weren't that big, but the ends would be, I'd say, a couple of yards sometimes from the
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
guards.
And I just remember some of those kids being like that, and that just, and I think, I've never really talked to Coach Hoyer about that, what his thinking is, but I'm assuming that's to try to, put a little bit of pressure on your defense. What's his alignment going to be? And then it helps the offensive lineman out with their angles and things like that. I know a lot of teams will do that, on the edge, and then that is hoping, they're hoping to widen out that defensive end, create
Mm-hmm.
bigger holes on the inside, things like that. If you tighten that defensive end down, then they try to get on the edge more. So I'm guessing he's just trying to work some angles on that.
It seems to me that against the 32 defense, it creates some problems because it allows for a lot of option blocking where he has to do, all the lineman has to do is get your guy covered, stay on you one way or another. I think they just killed Quivira Heights with that in the state game. I mean, I don't.
Well, in
The,
that 3-2, if you get wide like that, you can get down on linebackers a lot easier.
mm,
And I know, I think back to B&B in their 3-3, I think that's why they would go to even a more of a 3-3 look, because with those linebackers stacked, then it's harder to get on those outside backers. And we've actually ran in the last few years more 3-3. It fit our personnel. We had more linebacker type kids, and it is tougher. I know when we offensively go against a 3-3 and you stack those linebackers, their outside backers in particular are just protected a little bit more. So I think they are harder to get to than your typical 3-2.
certainly, yeah. How many years has it been since you've been an officer of the association?
I think I gave up that position probably 4 or 5 years ago. When I was younger, I wanted to get on there, so I got on one year. I believe it was supposed to be as the secretary, and then there was some changeover and some coaching above me, and some other positions came over. So I never actually became the secretary. I jumped right to vice president for one year, and then the next year there were some more coaching changes, so I jumped right into the president. And it was supposed to be like a 3 to 4 year tenure, and I ended up, I honestly don't know how many years I was on there. It was probably pushing about 10 years. And finally, I was able to kind of step down and let some younger guys get in there. And right now, Coach Slater from Burlingame is doing a good job as our president.
What are some of the responsibilities that come along with that? Because I imagine there might be some young coaches out there who maybe they're similar to you. They think, man, I should get involved with this. I should, play a role.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great association to be a part of. Kind of your roles, if you're going to be, one of the officers, is mainly just getting together for our yearly all-star meeting. We've been doing that, I guess, down in Tescott for about as long as I can remember. During January, we usually meet, and that's when we have just kind of our one annual meeting to discuss any business, new topics, things like that. That's when the coaches come together and we actually do the selection process for the 8-man all-star game. Um, as an officer, I guess some of your responsibilities, depending on what position you have, you'll have to kind of reach out to, we set up district chairpersons, and you'll kind of relay information to those district chairpersons, and then they forward on to the district's coaches in their district as far as upcoming events, the meeting, getting your nominations in for those meetings. If you have any things that you'd like to address, Keisha, as far as rules change, as far as playoffs, things like that. Coach Cole's there at Nest City he's still very active with the association. He's very good at helping when we go through any process of wanting to look at rule changes as far as playoffs and things like that. We can address those things through our association as well. So there's lots of different things that, young coaches can do if they're interested in getting there. They might not have to jump right into being the president. They could start out as being maybe a district rep to get their feet wet, and then kind of just gradually move up from there.
Yeah, sounds reasonable. Right, I've got a time machine, and I'm going to let you go back in time. You get to talk to young Coach Steinbrock, give him some advice, just starting out, what are some of the pitfalls you'd help him avoid?
Well, when I first came in, I felt like the kids just needed their fire lit and their butt chewed a little bit. And I soon found out that it takes more than just chewing butts and yelling at kids to win football games. So I think when I first started, I probably should have spent a little bit more time building relationships with the kids. And I think that probably would have helped as much as anything. And that's what I tell a lot of young coaches when they talk to me and they ask me, what are some things that you wish you could do over? Probably those first couple, 2 or 3 years, I probably would have focused on building the relationships. And I think I do a much better job of that now. So many of my closest friends that are in their 30s and mid 30s are guys that I, coached those first few years. And I just feel like that's so important. If you can build relationships where your players trust you and you trust your players, everything else just seems to fall into place.
Certainly. There's been increasing awareness over the years about the health risks of football, especially concussions. Not just on that topic, but in general, if you were trying to explain the value of football to a young man who was undecided about playing, what are some of the things you might tell him?
Just so many life skills that you get from football. You know, life in itself is extremely tough, just like football. Life can be a roller coaster of emotions up and down. And if you've ever been a part of a football game, you're going to have the highest of highs and the lowest of lows within those 4 quarters. I go back to the physical, the mental toughness. That's one of the things I preach to especially the incoming freshmen that come out for football. I applaud them because I think in today's age, it's so easy for kids to just opt out and not do things. And I think a lot of kids look at football as being tough and maybe scary, and I can't do it. So they don't go out. So I do applaud, and I actually go out and try to recruit as many of the boys to come out. And I tell them, I don't know if you'll ever help me win a game on Friday night or not, but I think as a young man, I think it's going to make you more mentally tough. I think it's going to make you more physically tough. And when you get out of high school, I think you're going to take some of the things that you learn from football as far as teamwork, overcoming adversity, battling through things physically and mentally. And I think that'll help you get through some of the tough times in life. So, yeah, football, I think it shaped me. And just from the conversations I've had with so many of my former players, I think it's really helped shape them into the young men they are.